So I remember one day in class, he said something about, I don't know, we were talking about how crazy the Romans were, and Mr. Brown said, no wonder the Greeks don't like these people. And I was like, yeah, they might have not liked him, but the Romans didn't care about that. The Romans just were themselves, and although the quote was probably taken by the other members of the class is just, yeah, the Romans were some pretty wacky people, I really felt it, and I feel like he was trying to communicate with me on another level that, you know, don't be afraid to be yourself. Always be yourself, because the Greeks didn't like the Romans, and if there's people who don't like me, you know, the haters, then I can't pay attention to the haters because the Romans didn't pay attention to their haters. So you shouldn't either. You should always be proud to be yourself.
Mr. Brown would, so there's a soccer field, or just kind of like, we use it for everything, and it's right behind LASA, or the portables anyway, and it is on top of, according to Mr. Brown, a trash pile, and so there are lots of really fun things that you can find when it rains there, because naturally the dirt turns into mud, and then there's stuff in the mud that was in the trash pile. And so one time, he has this red stapler on his desk, and it looks kind of beat up. Like, no one really thought anything about it, but one time he told us that he actually got that stapler from the mud, which is gross, but also resourceful. So, that was cool.
I mean, I'd come in late to his class every day, which wasn't super great, but he was always like really kind, and he gave me food when I hadn't eaten breakfast sometimes, so that was nice.
I remember one time Mr. Brown was passing back our quizzes, and I don't know, I think this was a quiz that I was kind of nervous about the results of, but that's besides the point. He was folding paper airplanes, because some other kids in our class were folding paper airplanes too. And so he just took a quiz and then folded it into a paper airplane. He tried to throw it at the person whose quiz it was, but the paper airplane went and zoomed up in the air and it got stuck in the ceiling tiles. And he started smiling and laughing. There was just such pure, divinely joy on his face.
One distinct thing about Mr. Brown is he always had chalk all over his pants. Just like bright white chalk on like dark slacks. And it'd be like his handprints and like where he rubbed up against the board. And everyone kept telling him that chalk was getting kind of unprofessional. But he said that he'd never trade it up for anything, because sometimes the old ways are better, you know? And having chalk all over yourself, it's like a source of pride, because sometimes life is messy. And chalk reflects that.
I don't know, it felt like I was truly looking at the philosopher king that I follow now.
Let's take a bigger point. Mr. Brown accepted that he wasn't God. How can a man of such high stature just come down and be so humble? What a man.
So one thing that Mr. Brown talked about a lot was the short, pathetic, disease-ridden lives that we are all living. And there's a lot to unpack there. And so one thing that I can take away from that is that life is short, as he said in the quote, and that we shouldn't take every moment for granted, because that could be our happiest moment and we didn't know it. And another thing about that quote is that the we aspect implies that we are all living on the same plane of life, and from all people from all walks of life, no matter who they are, their life is more or less insignificant in the grand scheme of things, which tells us that it doesn't matter who you are. You can change a lot of different things, and you can do what you want with the short time that you have. And I don't know, I was really inspired by that personally.
How do you
like Mr. Brown.
As little as possible. Alex, stop looking at porn.
I'm on blend.
It's the same thing.
What's your name?
Ladarius Williams.
So, tell me about our good Lord and Savior Brown.
He's an interesting guy. Mr. Brown was really knowledgeable, and for the 2.5 years that I had him, he was kind of insane. I was constantly referred to as Big Daddy.
Huh. I'll buy you a new coat.
No, my feet stop.
Shoot, hold it. Hold it.